What's up, family? Another beautiful day, loving it, giving thanks and praise to Creator, whoever you may conceive him to be. Subscribe, thumbs up, like, share the videos, put on notifications so you know when I post videos. Listen, this clip I'm going to put here is about, I don't really like to bring about racism, but the fact that they did about people back in the day is a really outrageous. Anyway, this clip I'm going to put here is for information purposes only. I do not own the rights to the videos, folks. It just goes to show that we can live without them, but they can't live without us. They need us more than we need them, and we can just live and survive without them. Period. And they know it. That's why they always try to destroy us or kill us whenever we're doing something constructive or something that's beneficial to us. They will want to try and destroy us. Anyway, folks, check these clips out. Much love to you guys.
100 black cities across the United States. These cities were places where black families who came fresh from the horrors of slavery dared to dream of a better future. They built an entire town that had homes, schools, and businesses that stood as symbols of hope and resilience. But what happened next is shocking. These communities became targets of resentment and destruction. The supremacy didn't just want to suppress black success, but also wanted to erase it from existence.
This can improve your...
Under the guise of progress, the government stepped in, flooding these communities and drowning their stories, their legacies, and their dreams beneath the waters. Why would the government do this? And how could such a deliberate act of erasure happen on such a large scale? This isn't just a story of lakes and dams, but one that was inspired by racism as a weapon against black progress. This is a dark chapter in history that most people are not familiar with. A deliberate attempt to ensure these black cities were wiped away and forever forgotten. In this video, we're exposing these hidden stories and bringing them to light. Get comfortable as we dive into the depths of America's water to uncover how systemic racism led to the literal and figurative drowning of black progress. Before we dive in, like this video and subscribe to this channel. Let's understand what led to the drowning of these black cities. We must first know what they represented: resilience, innovation, and hope. After the Civil War, when the slaves became free, black Americans found themselves in a tight situation. Freedom had been declared, but equality was far from reality. Many former slaves and their descendants sought refuge in building their community where they could excel and be free from the oppression of the whites. From the late 19th century to the early 20th century, these black communities had made significant progress. Some towns like Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is popularly known as Black Wall Street, and Eatonville, Florida, rose as beacons of success. Beyond being residential settlements, they were centers of innovation. Schools were established, businesses prospered, and black Americans proved that they could achieve greatness despite the odds stacked against them and the challenges that dropped their back to the ground. But their success did not just pass by like the wind. It attracted the interest of the whites, and it became a threat. White neighbors became envious, and a deeply ingrained belief in black inferiority and a growing resentment. How could a people they once enslaved now exceed them in wealth, education, and influence? Systemic racism became a lifestyle. The same government that promised freedom and justice for the people began to create laws and policies designed to frustrate the progress of blacks. Jim Crow laws promoted segregation and denied black citizens of their fundamental rights. These policies ensured black families couldn't buy homes in prosperous neighborhoods, sidelining them from wealth.
Not much has changed.
Despite these barriers, black communities continued to progress. During the early 1900s, many of these towns were entirely independent. Banks owned by blacks, schools, hospitals, and churches provided everything their residents needed, but their prosperity came at a dangerous cost. They became targets. White supremacists unleashed acts of violence, and entire towns were burned to the ground during race massacres. As if the violence wasn't enough, they employed a new measure of destruction, one that disguised to be progress. Infrastructure projects like dams, reservoirs, and lakes became tools of oppression. Under the pretense of public good, governments declared eminent domain that forced black families off their land. These communities that were built on dreams and hard work
Sons of bitches.
were drowned and erased from the map and memory of people. What we see today as tranquil bodies of water were thriving centers of Black excellence. The question is, why hasn't history remembered them? Why were their stories given a blind eye? The answer lies in the intentional act of systemic racism.
It felt like my
This act was determined to harm Black communities and to ensure their successes were forgotten. These cities weren't just towns, they were legacies that, despite being buried underwater, demand to rise again. The conscious drowning of Black cities across the United States wasn't just a historic accident, but a calculated act of systemic oppression.
Deliberately done.
The government used eminent domain laws and infrastructure projects as cover to carry out a campaign that would erase thriving Black communities and replace them with lakes, reservoirs, and dams. Under these calm waters are the physical remnants of homes and businesses, and also the buried legacies and stories of Black resilience and progress. During the early 20th century, as the country grew, large-scale infrastructure projects became crucial to meet the demands for electricity, water, and flood control. The government used eminent domain with a claim of private property for public use as a tool to seize land.
Yeah, right.
However, Black communities were disproportionately targeted, with almost no regard for their rights or any form of compensation. These projects weren't just about utility, they served a dual purpose. Under the guise of progress, Black communities were brought down to nothing, and their lands were often deemed expendable. In reality, these projects became a strategy to dismantle the economic and social backbone of thriving Black cities. An infamous example of a drowned Black city is Oscarville, Georgia, beneath Lake Lanier. During the early 1900s, Oscarville was an active Black community in Forsyth County, Georgia. It had a good number of schools, churches, and farms that were established by industrious Black families. But racial violence changed the whole narrative. In 1912, after baseless accusations against Black residents, white mobs forced almost the entire Black population out of the county. They went as far as seizing their lands, and by the 1950s, the government flooded the area to create Lake Lanier. Today, the lake is a popular recreation site, but only a few visitors know it sits in a community that was destroyed by racial hatred. Another city is Boynton, Alabama. Boynton was another thriving Black residential settlement that provided economic independence and a sense of community to its residents. In the mid-20th century, it was drowned to create the Walter F. George Reservoir. The families displaced by this project received little compensation, and their historic legacy was swallowed by the rising waters. Another city you didn't know about is the Tennessee Valley. During the New Deal era, the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, was tasked with building dams and reservoirs to provide electricity and flood control. Although the projects benefited many, Black communities were often given up in the process. Thousands of Black families were displaced, their homes and towns flooded, while white landowners were more likely to receive fair compensation. The government not only facilitated the destruction of Black cities, but actively ensured their stories were buried. Records of these communities were rarely preserved, and the descendants of displaced families were left without a voice. The establishment of these lakes and reservoirs wasn't a random act of development, but an intentional choice that prioritized white progress over Black lives. In many scenarios, the displacement was accompanied by violent intimidation. Black residents were often given short notice before being evicted. Those who resisted were threatened, or even worse, just to make them comply through fear. Before the flooding of these communities, the Green were already under siege. Incidents of racial violence like the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre and the 1919 Red Summer created an environment where Black towns became vulnerable. These communities that were once devastated by violence became easy targets for so-called progress. The drowning of Black cities is one of the earliest examples of environmental racism. White communities were often spared or adequately compensated, while Black towns were disproportionately chosen for displacement. This pattern echoes today in scenarios where black neighborhoods are subjected to harmful environmental policies and projects.
I
When
keep telling you
over
guys, nothing
200
much has
black
changed over the
cities were
years.
drowned under the umbrella of progress, the consequences of the destruction went far beyond the physical effects. These weren't just towns submerged
New Orleans
underwater,
flooding.
but aspirations of vibrant communities, symbols of black resilience, and the embodiment of dreams that refused to die after centuries of enslavement. What was lost in these acts of systemic racism still haunts us today and shapes the reality of racial inequality in America. These floods robbed black families of their wealth, land, homes, and businesses, never to be gotten back. The story of drowned black cities is more than just a historical tragedy. This exemplifies how systemic racism used infrastructure as a weapon and destroyed the dreams and aspirations of many. Think about this. For many white Americans, land ownership has historically been the cornerstone of generational wealth. It enables them to build equity, send their children to college, and pass down resources. For black Americans in these drowned cities, those opportunities were destroyed. This resulted in a widening racial wealth gap that persists even today.
So true.
Black families were forced to start over with little to no compensation.
Nothing.
They found themselves trapped in cycles of poverty. Their dreams of upward mobility were replaced with the harsh reality of systemic exclusion. For the descendants of these displaced families, the trauma ate deep into their emotions. Many grew up hearing stories of the cities that once stood. Their parents or grandparents spoke about the vibrant communities that turned into ghost towns. These stories inflict a sense of loss that's hard to quantify. A loss of a tangible heritage, of a physical connection to their ancestors, and of the pride that comes from knowing their people built something extraordinary in the face of oppression. Black neighborhoods are still disproportionately targeted for destruction or redevelopment, usually under the guise of progress. Highways are being built through historic black districts. Toxic industries are situated near black communities. Though the approach may have evolved, the intention remains the same. The waters may have covered the land, but they can never erase the truth. It's time to let these stories rise to the surface for the sake of justice and remembrance of those who were affected. In recent years, researchers have begun to dig deep into the fragmented records of these lost communities. They are revealing the location and the true story behind these cities that were erased from the archived maps. For example, Oscarville, Georgia, once dismissed as folklore, has been rediscovered through archival digging. Historians have found clear evidence of thriving black businesses and farmland that were submerged to create Lake Lanier. Similarly, the history of Seneca Village, which was a predominantly black settlement in what is now Central Park in New York City,
Yep.
has been unearthed, opposing the narrative that the park was built on empty land. Technology has also become a powerful tool
It was a
for
slave town.
rediscovering these histories.
Black folks live there.
Underwater archaeologists are using sonar technology to locate submerged towns, while digital platforms are creating virtual recreations of these communities. Projects like these bring the past to life and also ensure that these stories are preserved for future generations. Memorials and
Even
documentaries
Chinatown
are
was a
also
black
shedding
town
light on these
in
forgotten
New York City.
towns. Some community leaders and descendants are hosting events to honor the memory of their ancestors and ensure that the legacy of these communities doesn't go extinct. We all have a role to play in rediscovering these truths. It starts with education, learning about the history that has been intentionally hidden, and sharing these stories with others. It continues with advocacy, supporting the efforts of historians, activists, and descendants who are fighting to preserve these legacies. It forces us to confront the question, what can be done to repair the damage inflicted on these communities and their descendants? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe for more.
Like I said
Did you know
before,
that Amazon has a 50
like I keep saying, family, it's all about knowing. Once you know, they can't fuck with you. It's all about knowing for them. Know thyself. Know where you came from. Know who you are. You are unstoppable. You are unstoppable. There's nothing you can be, do, nor have. And they know this. That's why they try to suppress you, call you all sorts of names, or pull you over for no reason to make you feel in fear and then fears them. But no, we are supreme. Folks, I'm out here. Much love. Subscribe, thumbs up, share the videos, leave a comment later.